learners, and welcome to Chapter 16, which is all about endocrine physiology. So what we get to learn is that we're going to get an introduction to the endocrine system, secondary messages, and major hormones of the pancreas and adrenal gland. Finally, we will end with diabetes. Now, the endocrine system sends messages throughout the body, but we also know that the nervous system also sends messages throughout the body. So the question becomes, what makes the endocrine signals so unique? That's going to be our focus for this overall lecture. Let's go ahead and get into our introduction. Let's recall that the nervous system uses electrochemical signals. What kind of electrochemical signals? Action potentials and synapses that is going to use neurotransmitters as the chemical messengers to be able to send messages between neurons, right? Well, the endocrine system also uses chemical messengers. And in fact, one of the main differences between the nervous system and endocrine system is that the nervous system uses action potentials or electrochemical signals and chemical messengers like neurotransmitters, whereas the endocrine system only uses chemical messengers. Now, there's two parts of any chemical message, and that's going to be the chemical message itself, which for us is the hormone, and then the receptor, which is going to bind to messengers to initiate some type of response in the cell. Now, what is the chemical messenger? It's literally just a molecule that's going to travel from one place to another in the body to carry a message, which we call a hormone. Okay, so when we're thinking of the endocrine system, that's going to be more of a whole body movement versus just dealing with the nervous system. So again, we're talking about hormones. We are going to be talking about the endocrine system. And then what is a receptor? Well, once the message goes out, something has to receive that message. And that's what the receptor is. And the hormone is going to bind to the receptor, and then that receptor will initiate response. So you always want to be thinking hormone and the receptor it binds to, hormone and the receptor it binds to. But the goal is to try to classify chemical messengers the best way we can, or at least be able to describe them. And one way we can describe these hormones or chemical messengers is to talk about how far they travel and carry that signal, okay, or that message, right? How far do they travel to send that message out? Hormone plus the receptor here, and that is a plus sign. I don't know what that looks like. Let me write it smaller. Hormone plus receptor. And so always think of those in tandem. And guess what? The receptor is specific to that hormone. Because the hormone can move around in different ways and travel different distances, the receptor is going to be specific to that specific hormone. So let's talk about these distances. First, you can have very short distances. So endocrine is going to be a short distance chemical messenger. Break down this word to help us be able to understand this overall type of chemical messenger a little bit better. Now, auto means self, and crine means secrete. Okay? So that means it's going to secrete a hormone that is probably going to be around or on the same cell. Okay? So we can go ahead and write the same cell. So this cell is going to secrete hormones or chemical messengers, and the receptor for those hormones are on the same cell. So these are all of our little receptors. This hormone is going to be identified by that particular receptor so that the cell can communicate with itself. Now let's talk about paracrine. Now we already know crine means to secrete. Para means beside. So paracrine, you are still going to have short distances, but the receptor is within the same tissue. So that means cells of the same tissue. So you're going to have a hormone released from this cell, and then it's going to be able to be recognized by receptors on cells that are next to it. Okay? And again, this is going to provide those particular cells with information about their environment. We have our focus, which is going to be the endocrine chemical messengers, which we know are hormones, and they get to be able to move throughout the whole body. So yes, that means long distances. Okay? How do they do that? Well, they're going to use, again, hormones, and those hormones are going to be distributed by the blood. That means they move around through the blood. They also can move around through the lymph. Okay? So lymph nodes and blood cells sometimes are connected or near one another, so that, again, some of those hormones can start moving through the lymph as well. So because it is whole body, that means that this hormone or this messenger can move around the entire body. But that doesn't mean it's going to stop everywhere, right? It's only going to stop and give the message to a receptor that's specific for that hormone. So say you have the hormone that's going to start in the body, it goes through your blood. And why is it going through the blood? Because again, the blood circulates through the whole body, so it gets everywhere. And then say it's a particular receptor on your pancreas that that hormone is going to bind to give a message specifically to the pancreas. And that's how that works. You might also have a message that's going down into the back of your knee, right? You have a message that's going to your brain, your heart, all the different areas of your body. But the most important thing to remember is that that hormone, that message, although it can move everywhere, it's going to bind to a specific receptor so that the message is sent exactly where it needs to be. Now, to make it easier on ourselves, because we did already go over the nervous system, let's go ahead and do a contrast between the nervous system and the endocrine system based on the speed of the actual signal, the mechanism, meaning how it happens, the length of the stimuli, and the location of the action. Where is it actually located? All right, so for the nervous system, how fast are these actual signals being given? They are very fast. You don't have to have a specific number. We're just going to say fast or slow here. And if we are going to have a specific number, we won't really be able to focus on a particular number. We can focus on a unit, like milliseconds. And why are they so fast? Because, again, we're talking about action potentials. And also, most importantly, we're talking about myelinated axons, right? So that's going to allow us to have faster action potentials as well, because remember from chapter 11, we don't have all those excess leak channels leaking out our sodium. We get a chance to have that saltatory conduction where we're leaping from node to node to node from that myelin sheath, okay? So that's going to be very, very fast when it comes to the nervous system. Now, when it comes to the endocrine system, in contrast, it's going to be slow. We're talking minutes, sometimes several minutes for certain hormones to move throughout the body, because the blood is not just like, oh, speed racer, right? The blood is actually flowing throughout the body. And just think about times where you might have issues with the blood itself. Like, is there some kind of sludge in the blood? Is it moving very slowly? Maybe you aren't drinking enough water, things like that. Also with the nervous system, maybe you have some breakdown in your myelin sheath. I mean, you can think about those details as well. Now, what about the mechanism? Well, the mechanism for the nervous system in this signal is going to be action potential, which we know is going to go from neuron, one piece of the neuron, which is going to be the dendrites, we get our stimulus, all the way down to the axon terminals. And then, of course, that's going to cause a release of neurotransmitters, okay? And the neurotransmitters are going to bind to receptors. So yes, the neurotransmitters are little chemical messengers here. They bind to a receptor and again cause that gradient potential. Now for the endocrine system, of course, it's a little bit different. What are our chemical messengers? Hormones. And again, they get to move throughout the body. How? Through the blood. Okay, mainly it's going to be through the blood. Again, it also can happen through the lymph. What is the length of the stimuli? Okay, the length of the stimuli, very short. Also say fast here. Okay, so what does that mean? That means you're going to have a quick action potential. It's going to just quickly give out the neurotransmitters through a synapse, and of course at the synaptic cleft, and then you're going to have a quick response from that stimulus, from the neurotransmitter to create a gradient potential. Okay, endocrine system is going to be very long or longer. Why is it long? Because remember, we are moving things in the blood, so it's not this immediate or quick millisecond response. Okay. Also, let's talk about the location of the action. The location here is going to be very specific. Nervous system, we're talking about neurons. So we have a neuron, like the dendrite, that can be receiving a message, and then, of course, it goes all the way down to the axon terminal if we reach that negative 55 millivolts threshold. And then once it's at the axon terminal, again, you can release neurotransmitters and keep on sending that signal wherever it needs to go. So very specific to those neurons. Whereas the endocrine system is very diverse. You can go to many locations. Remember, you can have a hormone moving throughout the circulation of the blood, which is the entire body, but it only goes to one area. So the rest of your body is like, hey, there's a message, here's a message. And it's like, hey, this message ain't for you because you don't have the specific receptor that I'm looking for. So you want to just keep this thing in mind, okay? We know the body is going to use these two systems for communication, but how they're doing it is completely different. And our focus is going to be the endocrine system. Talk about the endocrine system, which is going to send messengers or hormones throughout the body through the blood. We also have to focus on that endocrine signal. So that chemical message is going to travel through the blood. And again, anything that's going to release and respond to those chemical messengers have to do with the endocrine system. Okay, so how do we go into detail to understand this? We have to understand the signals, how these messengers are released and how these messengers are received. We also can focus on glands that release these chemical messengers or hormones, and what portion of the endocrine system is what is going to regulate the body. So a little bit of homeostasis. Okay, folks, so there is a lot to get through. And we are going to focus on two main glands. Our focus is going to be the pancreas and the adrenal gland as we go along. But I will be talking about details throughout just to keep us clear about what other types of things are happening in the endocrine system. All right, so in general, the components of the endocrine system are going to be glands and endocrine glands. Remember, we also have exocrine glands, like when you secrete on a body surface, like for example, when you're sweating. But we're talking about endocrine glands, and endo means within, and of course, crine means secrete. And I forgot to say it in the previous slide, but endo means within, okay? So it's within the whole body, secretion within the body. Now the question is, how do we get that secretion? It's going to be through endocrine glands. So these are structures that are specialized for secreting substances, and the endocrine glands release hormones into the blood. So yes, some are going to be able to secrete, and some are going to be able to release hormones directly in the blood. Now there's many organs outside of the ones listed here that also release hormones, but you want to focus on the main purpose of that organ. So for example, the digestive system can release hormones, but the main focus of the digestive system is not for chemical messaging. It can do it, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is to break down food into energy, right? Here, instead of just saying glands in general, because that can be exocrine or endocrine, we're just going to focus on endocrine glands. So here's our list of endocrine glands. There are going to be 9 here, and of course, this is the visual that's right next to it. First, let's talk about the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is right in the brain, and if you go back to previous information, especially from chapter 13, and sensory physiology, we'll remember that the thalamus was there to help us, kind of like our relay station for all of the different information that's coming to the brain, right? And then we kind of go higher up to the somatosensory cortex. Well, the hypothalamus, hypo, of course, means below, and then you're going to have thalamus. It's near the actual thalamus as well. So the hypothalamus is going to be a part of the brain, and here's like where it's circled. It's like a small picture, but you can kind of zoom in when you download the presentation. Okay? And what does it do? Well, it's the middle of your brain, and it's going to regulate homeostasis. So all that time we had all that relay information from the thalamus, the hypothalamus is going to regulate homeostasis overall. Okay, so you might be thinking, I thought we were talking about the endocrine system. Well, guess what? This is how the endocrine system and the nervous system talk to each other through different parts of the brain as well. Next, we're going to have the pineal gland, which you see here. And the pineal gland is in the back of the brain, and it helps with circadian rhythms. So how you're sleeping, when you're waking up, things like that. And then finally, when it comes to the brain, we have the pituitary gland. Get this, we have the pituitary gland. Pituitary is right here. Okay, it's also, again, going to be part of the brain. It's right under the hypothalamus. And the whole goal of the pituitary gland is to make hormones. Okay, and it also tells other endocrine glands, we see here, it tells other endocrine glands what hormones to make. So the pituitary gland is very important. It's like, hey, you need to make this hormone, you need to make that hormone, and I can also produce my own hormones to send messages throughout the body, and of course that means to help maintain homeostasis overall. Now let's get into some specific endocrine glands that we might have heard of already, like the thyroid gland. Here's our thyroid gland here. And on the thyroid gland, well, let's talk about what the thyroid gland is first. Thyroid gland is going to regulate metabolism. Okay, so metabolism is the food you eat and how you process that food through chemical reactions in the body. And on the thyroid gland is going to be 4 little pieces, or 4 other glands called the parathyroid gland. So remember, beside the thyroid, they're going to be beside each side of the thyroid that you see here. And these parathyroids are just 4 small glands that are on the thyroid that are going to regulate calcium levels. And that's going to be very important if you think about calcium, especially when it comes to chapter 11 when we spoke about synapses, right? We'll also see calcium is very important when it comes to muscle contraction. So calcium is going to be important overall and also important for bones, okay? So that's what the parathyroid is all about. Then we're going to the thymus, and the thymus is basically in the chest, like you see right here in the chest, and it's really only active in childhood. Purpose in childhood is to help build up the immune system by basically maturing the T lymphocytes in the actual white blood cell. This gland's goal is to basically use the blood, because white blood cells are part of the blood, the composition of blood, and to spot and destroy any kind of infection or abnormal cells. But again, once you hit adulthood, the thymus is not really a factor for us. Now let's go ahead and get into the adrenal glands. So we see our kidneys here, and it looks like a little hats that are sitting atop the kidney. Those are going to be our adrenal glands. Okay, and the adrenal glands are all about the stress response. So we're going to see what happens when you have a lot of stress, like cortisol rushing through your body that's coming from the adrenal glands, or that fight or flight response. We see that also from the adrenal glands too. Now let's go ahead and get into the pancreas. And the pancreas is right here. It's like long yellow organ here that's tucked behind the stomach, basically. And the pancreas is unique because it can also have it's a part of digestion, and it's also a part of the endocrine system because it has enzymes for digestion to help actually break down amino acids, for example. They break down proteins into amino acids. So they break down proteins in smaller pieces. That's going to be a part of digestion. Okay. But when it comes to the endocrine system, these are going to be hormones that are released that's going to regulate blood glucose level. So we're talking insulin, we're talking glucagon, and we'll see that more later. And then finally, you have the gonads. You can see some ovaries here, testes here. And these gonads, the whole purpose is to release sex hormones. So estrogen, testosterone. Okay. And we'll get into that mostly when we start talking about the reproductive system. Just know that even some of the stuff you don't see us talk about fully, we will usually probably get through as the semester goes along. So these hormones that are coming from all these different glands are going to be those chemical messages that circulate in the blood and the lymph. And it's going to hit a target cell. Why is it called a target cell? Because that cell has a specific receptor. Okay? And because of all these details when it comes to hormones and the fact that it has a specific receptor, these hormones can control a variety of bodily functions. So for example, hormones can control growth and development. As you can see a baby here, and then you have like an adolescent or teen. And there's a lot of hormones involved with growing up. And also hitting puberty and then after puberty as well. Next, we see that there's a lot of hormones involved in reproduction. So we see a woman that's pregnant here. And during pregnancy, there's a lot of hormonal changes, right? And it's going to be a lot of your gametes that are regulating this, especially when it comes to becoming pregnant. Again, what we'll see in the reproductive system as we go along, or the female reproductive system specifically. Electrolyte balance. So yes, it's going to be the endocrine system that's going to talk to the kidneys and tell your body how much urine to make. And also, in regards to the amount of urine, what's the right amount of water or the water volume in your blood itself. Okay, so that's going to be the electrolyte balance. Of course, we're talking about metabolism. We already talked about that when it came to the thyroid gland. And it's going to be how you eat and process food. That has to do with the endocrine system and hormones as well. There's hormones that say, hey, guess what? I may be full. Again, like associated hormones that's coming through the stomach. But overall metabolism, yes, there's hormones that regulate the overall metabolism. Like, for example, the adrenal gland is going to secrete cortisol. And cortisol has a huge factor in stress. And some people even have stress eating that happens. And that can affect your metabolism long term. And then also activating the body's defense. Again, the adrenal gland has to do with adrenaline. You can also call it epinephrine. And epinephrine is involved in the body's fight or flight response. All right, let's move on to how we group hormones. Because again, grouping them is going to help us categorize and remember things differently. All right. So what do we know about hormones? We already know they're chemical messengers used by the endocrine system in the whole body and for whole body signaling because they're moving through the blood, right? Mainly moving through the blood. But hormones can then be grouped by their chemical structures as well. And there's two types of hormones that we're going to focus on, which are going to be amino acid-based hormones. Yes, those same amino acids from chapter 2, and steroid hormones. All right, let's focus on amino acid hormones first, and then we'll get into steroid hormones. All right, amino acids are water soluble. So yes, there's going to be a lot of hydrophilic components. And if they're water soluble, that means they can actually dissolve in blood. And if they can dissolve in blood, it's easy for them to be transported in blood. Remember, we're talking about hormones. We have to be transported throughout the blood. So when it comes to amino acid-based hormones, they're dissolving in blood. So they don't need any extra help from any additional proteins to move through the blood. But think about it. If they're so hydrophilic, once they hit that cell membrane where you're supposed to be looking for a receptor, they can't cross the actual cell membrane. Why? Because we know the cell membrane is hydrophobic. So we have to make sure when it comes to amino acid-based hormones, the receptor has to be on the outside of the cell. On the outside of the cell membrane. So here's an example. We do have epinephrine or adrenaline up here as an example. And as you can see, adrenaline is /epinephrine is coming from the adrenal glands that sit atop the kidneys. And as you can see, we see epinephrine just moving within water. And we know that blood is mainly made of water, so that's the reason why they just kind of have a pool of water here. amino acid-based hormones, they can't just go directly in the cell and send their message. They have to make sure their receptors are on the outside of the cell, or again, some of these messengers can be embedded within the cell membrane. Okay? Now, this is going to be most of the non-sex hormones are going to be water-soluble amino acid-based hormones. Yes, there are all exceptions. One exception is the thyroid hormone. The thyroid hormone is going to be based on helping with metabolism. And guess what? It's an amino acid-based hormone, but it's actually hydrophobic. So it behaves very differently to what we see in here. Now let's move on to steroid hormones. Now, steroids are what? Are they proteins? Are they nucleic acids? Are they carbohydrates? No, they are lipids. So they're going to be synthesized from cholesterol. We know cholesterol is a lipid, okay? That means they're only going to be lipid soluble, not water soluble. If they're lipid soluble, will they have any issues crossing the cell membrane? No. They should have no problem because we know the cell membrane is mainly hydrophobic. And if we have these steroid hormones that, again, are synthesized from cholesterol, they will also be hydrophobic. But because they're hydrophobic, can they just move around easily in the blood, which is water-based? No. They have to be bound to a transport protein. Without the transport protein, you're not going to be transporting these hormones around the whole body. Okay? So, yes, they can cross the cell membrane. That means the receptor would be inside the cell. It doesn't need to be on the outside of the cell. It doesn't need to be embedded within the membrane anymore because these particular steroid hormones can actually cross that cell membrane and go inside the cell. So again, some examples will be like estrogen, which is what we have here. That is going to be a steroid hormone that is, again, synthesized from cholesterol. We also can be talking about testosterone. But here we have some ovaries that are going to release estrogen. We actually have a uterus here and a reproductive system of a female that's going to release estrogen. And we also see our estrogen in this little boat. And so that boat will be like our transport protein. Remember, it needs help to move through this body of water versus the amino acid where it didn't need any additional help. Once it reaches a cell, though, that has the receptors looking for, it can actually cross the cell membrane and the receptors will be inside the cell itself. And so automatically you'll see that these steroid hormones cross the membrane and then they'll be able to send their message directly into the cell. Whereas amino acids, they can't send their messages directly into the cell. We're going to talk about what they do instead in the next video. Now, let's go ahead and look at this little diagram here. And we want to ask ourselves, just by looking at this diagram, which is a steroid hormone and which is an amino acid-based hormone? We have here in the pink, and we also have the purple. So the first thing you want to do is just examine it. Let's say that these are our hormones here, and this is our hormone here. So this hormone is going to be able to cross the cell membrane and go inside of the actual cell to bind to its receptor. It's all about binding a receptor. And then that bound hormone receptor relationship is going to be able to send a signal to the DNA inside the nucleus. Whereas over here, we see our hormone that's bound to a receptor that's embedded into the plasma membrane. And then once that receptor is embedded into the plasma membrane, it is going to send a signal through multiple other proteins until it reaches the DNA. So two different ways this hormone is going to be able to get its signal in. As you can see in the pink, it's going to be more like a steroid hormone. Why? Well, what's the reasoning? Well, number one, the receptor is inside the cell. You can also say the hormone can cross the cell membrane. Over here, automatically, this has to be the amino acid-based hormone. And the reason, the receptor is on the outside of the cell. You can also say the hormone cannot cross the cell membrane. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some worksheet examples related to some of the information we just talked about. I'm going to focus on number 4. It says the table below lists several hormones and a short description of their specific function in the body. So I can see I have a hormone here and the function, and then I have all the different types of body functions here. It says using this information, meaning the hormone and its function, for each hormone, consider whether the hormone plays a role in each of the 5 major body functions listed. If the hormone does play a role, place a check mark in the correct column. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Insulin. The function of insulin is to lower blood sugar. Is that going to be a part of growth and development? No. Is it going to be a part of reproduction? No. Is it going to be a part of electrolyte balance? No. Electrolytes are a little bit different than, of course, glucose. Electrolytes, we're thinking of compounds that can disassociate in water solutions or in water-based solutions, for example, and create ions. So insulin is focused on glucose. That's not going to happen. The body's defensive. No, right? What's the only thing we said that was part of the body defensive? Well, that was coming from the adrenal glands. So we know as our fight or flight response, for example, or stress response. The only thing I can definitely put here is going to be metabolism. Why? Metabolism is all about the food we eat and how we process it. If you have an issue with blood sugar, how you process the food you eat is also going to have an issue. So I can definitely put a check mark here. Estrogen. Estrogen is a secondary sexual characteristic and regulates menstruation. So definitely a part of growth and development. Definitely a part of reproduction as well. Okay? Because again, if it regulates menstruation, that means it has to do with, okay, when you're menstruating, there is a whole hormonal process of whether or not you're going to create an egg that then gets fertilized, right? So just keep that in mind. Electrolyte balance, no. Metabolism, no. Body defenses, no. Anti-diuretic hormone. It decreases urine production and increases fluid in blood. And this has to do with growth and development? No. Reproduction? No. Metabolism? No. And also the body defenses? No. What about the electron balance? Well, think about it. We're talking about urine production. Urine has a lot of different electrolytes potentially in it, and increases fluid in the blood, which also has electrolytes in it. So yes, we can say electrolyte balance. And of course, some of them might be like, hey, I don't have all the details for all this stuff. Go off the functions and just think of the 5 major body functions that you can. And that's going to be just kind of adding in more details to this. You can also just use your text as well to help you kind of get these details. Just keep it in mind. You just want to make it as simple as possible for you. Cortisol increases blood sugar for stress response. So we already know it's going to be metabolism, so we talk about blood sugar up here. But we also know that cortisol is coming from, or we may not know just yet, but we will start to know, that cortisol comes from the adrenal glands. And adrenal glands are all about the body defenses. So yes, we can put a check mark here. Electrolyte balance, no. Reproduction, no. Growth and development, no. And then this one is going to be the easiest one because it says growth hormone, initiates cell division. There, it's all about growth and development. So that's how we kind of get through number 4. Again, for number 4, you might want to go and get more details in the textbook if you feel like, hey, I just need a little bit more detail outside of just the lecture. Because in the lecture, we can't get through everything, right? Let's go ahead and do number 6 as well. And it says insulin operates, okay, it says insulin operates by activating a receptor on the outside of the target cell. Automatically before I continue, if insulin operates by activating a receptor on the outside of the target cell, I'm thinking amino acid base. I'll put A acid, okay? Amino acid-based hormone. Based on your knowledge of hormone types, meaning steroid or amino acid, do you expect insulin to be an amino acid-based hormone or a steroid-based hormone, and why? Well, we already know it's going to be an amino acid-based hormone because, again, the receptor is on the outside of the target cell. It does not cross that cell membrane, all right? So let's go ahead and go through the answer choices. Amino acid-based because it does not pass through the cell membrane of the target cell. We know that's correct, right? Automatically, we know that's correct. Let's go ahead and read the other choices because this is exactly what we just said. And sometimes that kind of works out perfectly when you break down the actual question, and then it's like you can easily be able to identify the answer. Steroid because it does not pass through the cell membrane. That's incorrect. Steroids are lipid-based, so they are hydrophobic, so they will pass through the cell membrane. Amino acid because it is not water-soluble. Amino acids are water-soluble, so that works out there. Steroid because it is water-soluble. Steroids are not water-soluble. So this will be one of those, hey, I know some basic information. Let's go ahead and get a quick question answered. All right, folks, I'll see you in the next video where we're going to talk about how those amino acid-based hormones actually get their message inside the cell where it needs to go. See you there.